welcome everybody. Apologies for the croaky voice, but bear with me because it's not going to be me talking. You won't have to listen to me. It's going to be the expert Jason talking. So welcome again, Jason from Nori HR, to your second podcast with the Director's Choice.
You didn't scare me off the first time too much.
No, it was really, really good. I was just actually saying to Jason that we look very spring-like this morning in our colours. So, because it's a lovely sunny day, thankfully, after what feels like just a period of freezing cold and rain and darkness. Anyway, we've not come to talk about the weather. We've come to talk about the world of HR, and we've just had a quick chat beforehand, and I understand, Jason, you're going to give us a really thorough overview of what's happening for business owners within the realms of HR.
We are. So I'm going to go through what's actually coming into effect.
Okay.
Kind of towards April and May, which there's not massive changes. What's
Good to
kind of
know.
going through Parliament, what's going through the House of Commons and being read in the House of Lords, what's likely to come into effect. And then there's two elements that's going through consultation, which again is consultation getting feedback from the business community and employees that could come into effect, that could start influencing legislation.
Okay, right. Well, I shall hand over to you, the expert.
Thank you very much. So yeah, as I said, coming into effect in April is not too many changes. We obviously have the change to national minimum wage for all of the age categories, which obviously can be found online. You also have an increase to the statutory maternity, adoption, paternity, and shared parental pay. So that's rising from £156.66 to £172.48. And that's going to be on the 2nd of April that's going to come into effect.
Okay,
We
and it's
also have
just
an
a
additional.
change. Sorry, it's just a change in the amount. There's no changes to any of the other legislations or anything in place with regards to that.
Exactly. The eligibility and all criteria still remain the same if someone wants to make those claims. The parameters are still there. The bank holiday coming into effect on the 8th of May, obviously with the King's coronation, needs to be taken into consideration. We do actually get asked a lot of questions in regards to that because some of our clients ask about whether they have to pay or give staff an additional day off. Now, what I would say to that, it all depends on the wording within the contracts of employment.
Okay.
So let's take someone that's on 28 days normally, a full-time employee and a full-time equivalent. If your contract says that the individual gets 20 days plus bank holidays, then they are going to be legally and contractually entitled to that extra day.
Okay.
If your contract stipulates that it's 28 days inclusive of bank holidays, which is the UK statutory minimum, then you don't need to give them that extra day. Now, obviously, as a good employer, you might want to. So it's all how it's worded. So if you're saying inclusive of bank holidays, you don't need to give them the extra day, but you may want to. If it says 20 days plus, then legally and contractually, you're going to have to, because what you're stipulating when you say plus is that it's plus bank holidays. So on rare occasions where additional bank holidays are announced, you're then liable.
Okay, so just for clarity, so if it says, so say my contract said 28 days, which is inclusive of bank holidays.
Yeah.
If Jonathan, my director, says, okay, I'm going to, you don't have to come into work, but I'm not going to pay you for it because it's not, is that the way that would work?
It depends then. So if your employer is telling you not to come into work or they're closing, if they don't they don't enforce that annual leave in advance, then yes, they would have to pay you. So an employer can enforce annual leave on employees. What they have to do is they have to give twice as much notice as what they're trying to enforce. So if someone is working full time and an employer is trying to enforce 5 days of annual leave, a week's, then they need to give them 10 days notice, not including weekends, or to simplify, 2 weeks notice in advance. If your employer wants you to take the bank holiday off because they want to close, but your 28 days inclusive, they need to tell you in advance, generally about 3 days in advance. But a good employer should do it a bit longer, but you
Yeah.
never know. So yeah,
Okay.
there's no obligation in your practical example, for you to get an extra day because your employer could just enforce one of your 28 days for that day.
Okay. All right. Let's
Maybe
hope that's not in my contract and Jonathan doesn't listen to this.
I was about to say, maybe not what you wanted to hear.
I know, maybe I shouldn't have. I'm not sure what my contract says, to be fair. Okay, so we'll quickly move over. So any more about bank holidays?
No, that's the kind of that covers that, the May bank holiday and what employers may or may not want to do. Obviously, good employers generally are taking the viewpoint, especially if you look on LinkedIn, of just giving the staff the day off and adding that extra day from a morale point of view.
Yeah, and good for employee engagement, isn't it?
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Okay, what we're going to talk about now?
So we're going to talk about that. That was a
Moving
good
quickly
tip at
on.
the
Yeah.
end. So the next is laws that are currently being debated. So we'll go through the ones that are kind of in the House of Commons at different stages. So we've got day one right to flexible working. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this in the media and some clickbait and around the HR circles. So the government's looking at giving the employees and workers the right to do flexible working, predominantly employees, flexible working as a day one right.
Okay, can I just ask a question then?
Yep.
Can you just define what flexible working is? Because I think everybody's obviously got their own, what's the word? Their own
Viewpoint.
summary of what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It can be anything. It could be if you're a full-time employee and you want to reduce down to 3 days a week. It could be you're an office-based worker and you want to work from home some days. It's about flipping and changing your terms and conditions that have originally been agreed between both parties.
Okay, so it could be literally anything. It doesn't have to be that you want to work from home a day. It could be anything from cutting your hours down to working different hours. So coming in
Correct.
earlier, finishing earlier, anything like that. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Anything like that, that kind of word that you're talking about variation of your terms.
Okay.
So
So
at the
that's
moment, oh, go on ahead.
no, I was going to say, so that's being talked about at the moment.
Yeah, so that's been talked about at the moment. Whilst obviously nothing's definitive, it's highly likely that where at the moment you need 26 weeks service, that's going to go down to a day one right. They're keeping in place, or very likely to keep in place, the 8 business reasons that it can be a flexible working request can be refused. And this is where a lot of people get very confused. They start hearing that it becomes a day one right to flexible working or to request flexible working. Companies forget, and a lot of people forget, it's still a request. An employer has still 8 statutory reasons that they can refuse a flexible working. You know, it could be operational difficulties, financial difficulties. You know, there could be technological. There's 8 reasons that a business can turn around and say we can't support this, and they're looking at then a kind of minimum period of response. At the moment, it's a 3-month response from the date it's kind of submitted, and then holding a meeting. They're looking to cut that down to 2 months to kind of add a bit of urgency to employers. You can also, at the moment, only do 1 request per 12-month period. There's rumours that the government are going to extend that to 2 requests per 12-month period. So, but as I said, the caveat is we don't have any definitive that this is what's going to happen.
Okay.
There's currently through the House of Commons, they're looking at the miscarriage leave bill. And again, they're looking broadly at ensuring 3 days of paid leave, paid bereavement leave for people who've experienced a miscarriage. They're looking at a fertility treatment bill, where to require employers to allow employee to take paid time off for fertility treatment. Again, we've not had any definitive time what that would look like or what the bill may include. And then there's worker protection bill. So this would actually impose a specific legal duty on employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of employees in the workplace and actually make the company liable for third-party harassment. So if customers or clients start harassing staff. We've obviously had the recent PR big announcement in the news by McDonald's where they signed up for the Equality and Human Rights Commission with the Bakers Union to try to minimize and take active steps to reduce sexual harassment within their restaurants.
Okay. Good stuff. Anything else?
So there's what currently going through the kind of the House of Commons, kind of getting reviewed by MPs. We then have obviously what's going through the House of Lords. So it's passed. These are the ones that have passed the House of Commons, been pushed on. They actually, we think these are going to start coming into effect, and the House of Lords are reviewing it and kind of making any recommendations or amendments.
Okay.
So I'll go with the 3 kind of not lower level ones, but there is one big one that's currently sitting in the House of Lords that I'll touch on at the end. So one of the ones in the House of Lords is the Protection from Redundancy Bill. So this kind of extends the protection from redundancy for women during or after a protected period of pregnancy. So it gives more enhanced protection to what the current laws currently allow and what the case law allows. So something employers need to be mindful of if they ever do go through a redundant situation and this bill is in effect and they do have pregnant employees, there's going to be enhanced protection around that.
Okay.
We've got the carers leave bill. I know it's all a very dry subject and it's hard to make make this simple. So carers leave bill, again, it's gonna for employees who are providing or arranging care to 1 week's unpaid leave per year and protection from dismissal for having to take time off of that. So obviously if you become a carer or you're organising that kind of care. And then you've got the neonatal care bill, which is going to provide new rights to paid time off if their baby requires neonatal care.
Okay.
Obviously, quite a few of those bills, very, very the right way to go and the right kind of bills to come into effect.
Yeah, and it feels like it's all because obviously the workplace is changing, and a lot more. I was going to say mums, but I'm not allowed to say. So a lot more parents are coming back to work, aren't they? Because they've got to work. They can't afford to have children, and one of you stays at home, which was kind of the norm several years ago. So I suppose all of these are coming in place to help protect people and also to encourage people to want to come back without the fear of them being exposed, because they do now have a child that they need to look after, or they have got somebody else they need to care for. Because everybody, I think the economy needs as many people as possible to come back into the workplace, and not to be fearful of doing that because of what the repercussions might be if they do have a poorly child or they're caring for a relative or etc. So it all seems to be moving in the right way and protecting the employer and the employee as well.
Yeah, and I think there's further, the government could go further in a lot of areas. We talk about at the moment kind of skill shortages and labor shortages and the kind of labor
Those are the
market
words
as
I
it
was
is.
looking for. You can
Yeah.
tell I'm not in HR.
And if you look at some of like, take things from a simple, I take my own personal experience, myself and Amrita's, you know, we ended up paying something like £1,200 a month for nursery fees. And, until Taylor turned 3, our daughter, we didn't get any support in regards to finances. We're not kind of rolling in it as people may think when you have the title business owner or MD.
Yeah.
We're a small growing business. And there is that massive gap where, from a financial point of view, putting a child in nursery from the age of 1, when predominantly, and I'll kind of generalize this because predominantly women do take up
Yeah.
the responsibility of childcare. Not all, not 100%, but I think case law and society would say the majority. So there's still a lot of areas I personally feel the government needs to go further and provide that support, because in certain roles, in certain kind of incomes, why would you pay 12 in this example £1,200 to potentially go and be back to work for what, two and a half thousand? Well, you're only earning really then 800 to maybe
Yeah.
1,300, depending on if you're in a high paying job like that.
Yeah. And also, I think, as a parent, mother or father, when you go back to work, there is a degree of guilt that you're leaving your child. So you've got that emotional baggage that you're carrying, and then you're having to pay for it and not really coming out with much afterwards. And that's where I think I was trying to say, that's where a lot of parents would be like, why am I even doing this? And then then you've got the fear that because you're a parent, you might have to finish work early or ask for flexible working, and it all becomes a bit more, is it actually worth it? And then people stop coming back into the workplace, and then there's a skills shortage. And then on the flip side, you have parents who care for their children, and when you don't need to be there as much, for example, when they're in senior school, they've then got this huge employment gap, and nobody wants to employ them because they've not worked for X amount of years. So it's almost like you end up in a vicious circle for wanting to have a child, when that's kind of what most people want to do. So I think it's definitely moving in the right direction, but I agree there's probably a lot more that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Anything else
And then
happening?
yeah, the last big one, and this is the one I kind of left
Need
to
a drum
the
roll.
end. I don't know if we need a drum roll because it could either go one or two ways. So it's in regards to retaining EU laws. So it's highly anticipated by the end of December that the UK is looking to rectify and potentially retain a lot of EU laws, or they have the ability to potentially change them. Now, this could either be, as some people are quoting, the biggest shakeup in any generation of employment law, given obviously we've got to rectify the European law into UK law, or it could be the biggest letter, the biggest damp squid that
Okay.
we've ever experienced. Because if they literally just take all the European laws and rectify it into UK, then there's no changes. So
Okay.
we've got nothing to talk about. They could obviously impact a lot of different laws. I'll not name any particular parties or anything like that, but some parties are, for example, the TUPE regulations, the Transfer of Undertakings, Protection of Employment. There's certain political parties have always had a bit of a grudge against that one. But we'll see what happens with certain laws as we get closer to December. But that's the big one to kind of keep an eye on. But like
Okay.
I said, it could literally just be there's big kind of drum roll and big gear up, and then there's nothing. They don't change anything.
Is that why you said don't do a drum roll just in case nothing happens?
Yeah, literally, because it could just come December and they just go, yeah, we'll just rectify everything into UK law and change it in the future if we need to.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll keep us updated on all of that as things start to move forward towards December. I mean, December will probably literally be here before we know it. So anything else, or is that everything that's happening in the world of HR at the moment that we need to know about?
That is everything that's going on at the moment and things to keep an eye on. In regards to consultations, so it's not going through Parliament at the moment. This is just the government going out to employees and employers to get their feedback. Is the hire and hire and rehire. Sorry, the fire and rehire.
Okay.
In
And what's that?
that was on the back of the ferry scandal, P&O, in regards to where they got
Oh
rid
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
all of their staff. So the
God, yeah, I
government,
remember that. I'd forgotten about that, where they just did that
I know.
amazing Zoom call.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's yeah. So they're looking to potentially change and introduce a statutory process in regards to what consultation. Again, they're
Okay.
trying to look at whether tribunals then are kind of given the power to enforce kind of an uplift of claims if an employer hasn't followed a fair process and a transparent process. So that's one to kind of keep an eye on. And then the other one is the holiday pay. So on the back of the Harper and Brazil recent case in regards to what part-time workers and employees
Okay.
should be paid in particular, and those that work irregular hours, the government are looking at do they look at a 52-week period that also includes unpaid weeks. So at the moment, the ruling is if you've got a 52-week window and there's workless weeks, you discount that for your purposes of your calculations of holiday pay. The
Okay.
government are asking the business community and employees whether that should just be a simple block of 52 weeks to keep it simple.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes into effect.
Okay, amazing. Well, that was all really useful and very, very interesting as always. I think obviously the bank holiday is something that will affect most employers, and also the national minimum wage that's about to change as well, and the changes to maternity, paternity, was it adoption as well that you said?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
parental, yeah.
yeah. So, but as always, if you want any more information on that, you can find Nori HR on our platform, which is the directorschoice.com, under the HR section, or you can find Jason on LinkedIn. I know that he's very active on LinkedIn, and I'm hoping that you're going to attend our online networking at the end of the month, which is going to be open to all business owners, and they'll be able to engage with experts like yourselves and go through perhaps any of the questions that they've seen on the podcast and find out a little bit more.
I look forward to it.
Perfect, great. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to the next one. Don't know what the subject is, but I'm sure it will be something very relevant and very interesting. So thank you so much again for your time, Jason.
That was my pleasure. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Bye.